Hello guys, welcome back to another Android Studio tutorial. Today we are going to learn about how to establish communication between two fragments. So we can start with a new Android Studio project. So create a new project in Android Studio. Here I name it as Fragment Communication. Select an empty activity and click Finish. So here the project is created. So first here I am going to add two fragments to this application. So now we can close the files of main activity. Now here I am going to create a new fragment. So right click the app folder, select new option and select fragment. Select blank fragment. Specify the fragment name. Here I name it as message fragment. No need of these factory methods, no need of interface callbacks now, and click Finish. So now here the fragment is created. So now we need to add some user interfaces for this fragment. So open fragment message.xml. Go to the XML version of that file. So here the root element is a frame layout. So for easiness, here I am going to modify the root element into constrained layout. There is a text view is available. I simply remove that one. Now go to the design. Now change this one into blueprint. So now here I change the default margin into 16 dp. So now here I am going to add an edit text. So select the plain text, drag it into this layout. Now create the constraint for the edit text. Create a constraint at the left side. Create a constraint at the top side. Now modify the margin at the top into 55 dp. Okay. Now I need a button. So select the widgets. Drag a button into this layout. Now create the constraints for the button. Create a constraint at the right side. Create a constraint at the top. Now change the margin at the top of the button into 55 dp. Okay. So now select the edit text. Create a constraint at the right side. To align these two view components horizontally, we need to create constraints at the baseline text. So create constraint at the baseline text. Now select the edit text. So now modify this one into match constraint. So we change the width into match constraint. So this is the layout. So now we can view the design. So this is the layout for the display for the message fragment. So now select the edit text. Here I am going to modify the ID of the edit text into txt message. Now here is the text for that one. I remove that one. Instead of text, here we are going to add some hint for it. Enter a message. Okay. So now select the button. Here the ID of button, I am going to change that one into BN. Now modify the text on the button into send. So this is the layout for the first fragment. So now we are going to create another fragment. So right click the app folder, create another fragment, select fragment, select blank fragment, specify the fragment name. I name it as display fragment and click Finish. Okay, here the display fragment is created. Now open the layout of the newly created fragment. So here also the root element is a frame layout. I modify the root element into constrained layout. Here is a text view is available. Simply remove that one. Go to design. Change this one into blueprint. So here we need a text view. So drag a text view. Now create constraint for the text view. Create a constraint at the left side, right side, at the top. Now create a constraint at the bottom. Okay, so now modify the ID of the edit text into txt message display. Now make the text into bold, align at the center. Now modify the text size. I'm going to modify the text size into 24 dp. Message appear here. Okay, so this is the layout for the second fragment. So now we have two fragment, message fragment and display fragment. In message fragment we have an edit text and a button. So if the user enter a message on the edit text and click the button, we have to display that message in our second fragment. That means the first fragment have to send a message to the second fragment. That means the first fragment has to communicate with the second fragment. So now we need to add the container for the fragment in main activity. So open resource, open layout folder, open activity main.xml. So here this is a constrained layout. Here is a text view is available. Remove that one. Change this one into it's already blueprint. Now we need to add a container for the fragment. So select layout, select a frame layout, drag it into this layout. Now create the constraint for the frame layout. Create a constraint at the top, constraint at the left, constraint at the right side, create a constraint at the bottom. Now create an ID for it. Here I am going to specify the ID as fragment container. So this is the container for the fragment. Now change this one into design. Okay, so now we need to add the first fragment to the container. So open main activity. So here I am going to add the first fragment to the container. So check the condition if find the viewpy id r.id fragment container not equal to null. Now check the second condition if saved instance state not equal to null. That means the activity is resumed. In that case simply return. Now we can add the fragment to the main activity. So now create an object of the fragment. So create an object of message fragment. Now I am going to add the fragment to the main activity. So get support fragment manager, begin transaction, call the add method, specify the container for the fragment container. Now specify the object of fragment. Here it is message fragment, and final one is a tag. So you can simply pass null for it, and finally we can commit that transaction. So here we successfully add the first fragment to the main activity. So we can check it. So I run the application now. So now the application available on this virtual device. So here we successfully add the first fragment to the main activity. So if the user enter a message here, and if the user click the send button, we have to send the message to the second activity, so a second fragment. So for established communication between fragments, we have to specify interfaces. It is not possible for two fragments to communicate directly. So for established communication between fragments, we have to specify interfaces. So now open message fragment. So the message fragment needed to send some message to the second fragment called the display fragment. So for that, here I'm going to create some interfaces. Public interface. I name it as on message send listener. So in that interface we need a method public void on message sent. So for this method we need one parameter, is a string value, is a message. So now we have an interface in the fragment. Now create an instance for the interface on message send listener. I name it as message send listener. So now we can initialize the instance of the interface from the on attach method of the fragment. So you need to override the on attach method. So here we have one parameter is a context. We need some object of activity. So create an object of activity. So we can initialize the activity using this context. Simply typecast this one into activity. Okay, now we can initialize the handler for the interface message send listener equal to activity. So now simply typecast that one into on message send listener. Okay, now here I'm going to add this one into a try catch block. So by using this try catch we can check whether the activity implement the method or not. So here add a catch block. Here the object is class cast exception. Now throw the exception, new class cast exception, activity dot toString must implement, our method name is on message sent. Okay, so now we have to create an object of button here. So create some variables for button. Now create some variables for edit text. So here create some view class object, and finally from this method return that view object. So by using this view object we can initialize the view components. So here we have two view components, button and an edit text. So view.find view by id, id for button is bn. Now initialize the edit text, find view by id r.id. Here it is txt message. Okay, now create the click listeners for the button. So button.set on click listener. So when user click the button, we have to get the message and send it to the next activity. So now we need to implement that interface inside main activity. So implements on message send listener. Now here we need to override that method. Here the method is on message send. So now the fragment can send a message to this activity using this method on message sent. Now go back to the fragment. So from this method we can call that method in main activity. So first we need to get the message, edit text, Okay, so now we can send the message to the method available in main activity. So here we can use that handler message send listener and call that method on message send and pass the message. So now the message available in main activity. So from this method we have to start the second fragment. So create some variables for fragment transaction, get support fragment manager. Okay, so first here I'm going to create the object of display fragment. New display fragment. Now we need to send the data to this fragment. For that, here I'm going to create some object of bundle class. Now add the data to this bundle. So bundle dot put string, specify key for it. Here I name it as message. Now pass the data. Here the data is available on this parameter message. Okay, now we can add the bundle object to the fragment. So display fragment dot I think that method name is set parameter. Okay, that method name is set arguments. Here it is, and pass the bundle. Okay, now we can replace the first fragment with the second fragment. So here we need to get the fragment transaction object, call the begin transaction. Now we can replace the fragment. So call the method replace, specify the container for the fragment. Here it is fragment container. Now we can specify the fragment object. Here it is display fragment, and finally specify a tag for it. So this is the fragment transaction. Now we need to commit the transaction. So before commit the transaction, here we need to add it to the backstack. Add it to backstack. Now we can commit the transaction. So this will replace the first fragment with the display fragment. Now in display fragment we have to get that message and display that message. So open display fragment. So here create some variables for text view. Here also create some view class object, and finally return that view class object. So now we can initialize that text view using this view class object. txt message display. So now we need to get the argument from the fragment. So create some bundle object. So here you can simply call the method get arguments. So now we can get the message from the bundle. Bundle dot get string, specify the key for the message. Here the key is message. So now we have the message. Now we can display that message on the text view. So text view dot set to text. Okay, so now go back to display fragment, sorry, message fragment. So here in message fragment, here I'm going to override one lifecycle method on resume. So from the on resume method, here I'm going to reset the edit text. Now we can test our application again. Okay, now run the application. Now the application available on this virtual device. Now here type some message. Now click the send button. So now the message displayed on the second fragment. So this is how two fragments communicate with each other. For getting more Android tutorial updates, please subscribe this channel now. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.